In this video, I'm going to walk you through the best way to manage your team inside of ClickUp. So if you're a manager right now and you're managing 1, 2, 3, 5, however so many people, and you're looking for a really good way to understand what your team is working on, what they've actually accomplished, what your whole team has accomplished, or just really understand your team's daily or weekly habits to see if maybe you need to micromanage them a little bit more. Maybe they're doing great and you should celebrate their success. Then this is going to be a great way for you to do that and pull all that information in one place. So obviously, if you're using a ClickUp, there's a lot of different ways that you can actually manage your team and create different views and assets for you to be able to do that. So yes, I could create a filtered view that allows me to just see maybe the work associated with my team. I could also use a ClickUp AI if I wanted to be able to pull a nice daily stand-up like that from last 24 hours, last 3, last 7 days. So there's a lot of different ways for you to be able to see what your team's working on, maybe what they haven't completed and things like that. But really the best way for you to be able to create sort of a single asset, single view, whatever you want to call it, for you to manage your team and their performance is to go ahead and create a dashboard here inside of ClickUp. So as you can see, I have a dashboard here. This one is labeled team performance, just like that. And I want to walk you through this structure, walk through some of the cards to help you set it up yourself, and just kind of go over the overview structure here so you can build a dashboard like this for your team to help you manage your team as well. So let's start at the top here. One of the most important pieces I'll say before I actually jump into this is what I would recommend you do is before you start doing any of this and building on a dashboard like this, I would go into your settings and I would go to the teams section here. You need to have the correct permissions to be able to do this, but you'll want to go ahead and set up a team for your team essentially. So as you can see here, I can go ahead and create a team. I could label this the department that I'm in. I could label this something maybe a bit more fun if you have sort of a team name. Whatever it may be, you can go ahead and set that up. Let's just say growth team like this. And then I can go ahead and save that. And then I can go ahead and just add members as well. So maybe it's myself, maybe it's Gabriel, maybe it's Gray, maybe it's Emily. I can just add anyone to that team that's a part of the team that I'm going to be managing. And so a lot of times these teams, people use them for assigning work out. I would not recommend that. If you've watched any of our videos at ZenPilot, we do not recommend assigning one task to multiple people. And so essentially, if you were to assign growth to a task, that's going to assign it to all the people here. So it's going to be assigned to 4 different people. So you don't want to do that because essentially that makes it hard for people to know who's actually in charge of this, what part of that am I in charge of. So it gets to be a little confusing. Doesn't create great clarity for your team. So I wouldn't recommend using this to assign work out. However, I would recommend it for basically communicating with a team, because as you can see here, I can say at growth in a comment, and that's going to ping all 4 of these different people that are involved in this team. So that makes it very easy for you to communicate and not have to @mention every single person. I can just @mention growth, and that's going to help ping 4 different people within my team. And then in addition, we can also use this for filters in both views and dashboards, so that I don't have to say assignee is all 4 of those people. I can say assignee is growth, and that's going to pull all of their data into one spot. So it just makes it a little bit easier for things like that. So definitely go ahead and go set up a team, put your whole team in there, maybe name it something fun if you want, whatever it may be. Go ahead and create that first. And so now let's jump back into our team performance dashboard and walk through the layout of this, as well as a few additional cards here. So at the highest level, we're going to have a section for last week's performance, because we want to understand how well we planned work last week and actually completed that work before we actually get into anything this week. Because essentially what we're trying to do is we're trying to get very good as a team at planning work with those due dates. So the due date needs to be essentially, it needs to matter. It needs to be when we're actually going to get that task done. We need to get really good at planning that out and actually completing those tasks on time. So this is kind of a great way for us to create some cards here to be able to see that information and to know how well we actually did, because this is going to be just telling us how well our team is performing, how are those habits that we're forming as a team as well. So as you can see here, I have a couple of different cards. This one is planned tasks by assignee. And so this is a nice, as you can see here, this is a nice bar chart that allows me to basically, as you can see, pull in assignees and tasks with the X and Y axis there. And then I'm also showing assignees. As you can see, I have that team all pulled in. Marketing here, again, I don't have to pull this in individually by typing in people and assigning it or pulling in those assignees. I can just pull in that one team there, which makes it just easier for me to do this. And I'm also grouping by status here. And then I have a couple of different filters that are set up. So I'm looking at, well, the due dates from the last 1 week. So if you wanted to, you could look at this at a higher scale as well. So this could be last 2 weeks. This could be last 1 month, however so many days, whatever it may be. You can really adjust this, very customizable depending on what you want to see. I also have the status is not planning. The reason I have that in there is because we have a planning status that we use at ZenPilot. Essentially, it's a way for me to populate a backlog, because I can basically, all the tasks that go into the system, I can put in planning before they actually get planned out with due dates. So that's kind of how we use that, but I'm not looking at that inside of this particular card. Then I also have a task type is not record. Just some information on that. Essentially, what we use it for is because inside of my ClickUp workspace, I have actionable tasks, but I also have tasks that are just more of records, because we have a CRM system in here with deals, companies, and contacts. So someone might be assigned to that contact or that deal. Doesn't necessarily mean it's an actionable task that they need to be completed. It's just a record within the system that they might be assigned to. So I want to filter all of that information out. So I use the filters to be able to do that. Anyways, looking at this planned task by assignee, as you can see here, this kind of shows me how well we planned work out and how well each individual person actually did last week. So as you can see here, we didn't do all that great. We had a bunch of tasks planned out, but we didn't even start any over here for Kuba. And then I only closed out one of these and not started 8. And I can also pull to see what those tasks actually are. And so that's a bit of an issue there to see that. And so after that, now we have a nice pie chart to show us just as a team as a whole. So not looking at individual people, but how do we do as a team? How much did we actually plan out that we didn't start? How much was actually closed? So we only closed one task last week. That's not very good. But as you can see, that's where we'll be able to see that information. And now as I go over to the far right, I'm also going to be able to start to see sort of my sort of overview as a team as well. So how many tasks were planned? All of these are just going to be calculation widgets. And so now I'm just looking at all the tasks that the due date was last week. Again, sort of the same filters, and the assignee was our marketing team there. And then I'm looking at how many were actually closed, and then how many were closed on schedule. So the big difference between these two is that closed essentially means we closed that work last week, which is great. That doesn't necessarily mean that work had a due date or was planned for last week. We might have been sort of still doing work that was planned for the previous week before that one. And so you can start to see the difference there. I only closed one task on schedule. Essentially what that is meaning is all the tasks, if I go into these filters here, the due date was last week and the date was closed last week as well. So the only task that we actually closed on the schedule that we set for that specific task, again, shows us how well we are at planning. It was only one specific task. So we're probably just completing a bunch of overdue tasks or tasks that were scheduled for earlier dates, but we only closed one that we actually planned for last week, which again is not a great habit to have as a team, not a great momentum builder there. So that's sort of the overview of last week's performance. Again, I can also see now how many tasks have fallen overdue because we didn't do great last week. So we'll be able to start to see that sort of total. We don't want that to build up. We want to essentially get that down to 0. Now that's sort of the high level of the individual work that our team members are working on. Now as a team collectively, how much work did we actually get done in terms of how much did we ship? How many deliverables or projects were actually completed? How many blog posts did we get done for our clients or for ourselves internally? How many landing pages or ad campaigns did we put together? Whatever that might be, now I'm looking at it at a higher level. As you can see, we didn't finish because we didn't do much work last week. We also didn't finish many deliverables or projects as well. And so with this, now I'm able to pull in a nice task list, which essentially is going to give me that information here. Now I'm looking more at the parent task level as opposed to the subtask level. And just an overview of this in terms of what this actually means. I want to go a little bit into our methodology and how we set up systems in ClickUp at ZenPilot. But the way that we build this, and the reason that there's a difference between the two, is let's give a good example here. But the way that I build this out is the parent task is the deliverable, or that sort of phase within a project. And so collectively, that's what we're trying to accomplish as a team. And then underneath that, this is all of the different subtasks that we're actually going to be working on as a team that's going to help us complete that blog post. So you're assigned to this, you're assigned to that, you're assigned to this. This is how we're going to pass work back and forth across the team. Essentially, we have subtasks, each assigned to one person. Again, we only want one person per task. Each of these has a due date for when this actually needs to be complete and a time estimate. so on and so forth. All that data is there to help me manage sort of those projects. And so that's kind of the difference between those different widgets. Is the widgets up top that I was talking about in the team performance are the ones that are looking at these individual subtasks. The task list that I mentioned below was the one that's focused on that parent task of what do we actually close or complete and ship as a team, because we need to pass this work back and forth. How well are we doing that? How well are we keeping to this timeline? This helps us really plan out when that should be done and when each individual task should be done to complete the specific blog post. So jumping back into our team performance dashboard, that's really the difference between this top column, this top section here, and what's been showing down here. So these are basically the subtasks that we're working on. These are the parent tasks that we've complete as a team, because those represent our deliverables or our project phases there. And so now after that, if you want to, you can also pull in time data as well. If you are tracking time as a team, especially if you're an agency, this is going to be super important. Maybe if you're an internal marketing team, it's not as important there. But now I'm able to see sort of the estimated time versus actual. These are all just going to be time reporting cards that you can create in here. So now I'm looking at last week. I'm looking at the specific users and the space that they actually track that time in. So that's just kind of a way for me to see how much we estimated for this person, how much they actually tracked last week. And now I'm able to look at billable versus non-billable if I want to. Essentially what this is meaning is, because I have these spaces set up, again, this is based off of our ZenPilot methodology and how we set up ClickUp, but I have work in the delivery space. If I'm an agency or someone that's servicing clients, this is essentially going to be all of my delivery or my billable work, and then operations and growth, because your team is also maybe going to be having internal meetings that go into the operations space, or maybe they're going to jump on a podcast episode with your head of marketing. And so maybe they are going to be tracking time against that, which is for growing the business and not necessarily tied to client work. So they'll be able to start to see the difference between billable and non-billable, because this is basically grouped by space. How much time do we track against operation space, growth space, or delivery space per user? So I can drop this down and see per user there. So a bunch of different ways that you can set up these different time reporting cards here. And then we also have the timesheet as well. So this is just kind of a way for me to see individually across that given week who tracked time per day. Again, just being able to see sort of those habits across the team there. So if that's important to you, if you need to be able to see that time data, you can definitely add in some time reporting cards there as well. And so that's really looking at last week's performance again, seeing how well we did in terms of how well we plan tasks, how will we actually close those tasks on schedule versus maybe we had to do a bunch of overdue work. This is kind of helping us build healthy habits and helping you understand how well your team is actually planning work out and completing that when it was actually planned. And now as we transition into this week's work, now we need to take a look at our overdue tasks. Because remember, we need to get this overdue work remapped, maybe reassigned if necessary. We need to complete this. We need to prioritize this a little bit higher maybe than anything else, because if it needs to get done, it needs to get done. We need to have more realistic due dates within our system to help us keep track of those timelines. And so here now I'm looking at all of the overdue tasks that maybe have not been completed last week, or maybe it's still overdue from the week prior, and we keep moving these due dates. So as you can see here, I'm able to look at the overdue tasks by assignee. This is essentially just a pie chart, just kind of giving me an overview of who is that person on the team that has a ton of overdue tasks. If it's really funneled one way to one person, what's the reason why? Is that because they're not getting their work done? Is that because we're assigning way too much work to them? We need to figure out what that issue may be as a manager. And so as you can see here, I'm just pulling all this information from different locations, just looking at our growth, delivery, and operation spaces. That's where my team's work is actually going to live. I'm looking at the amount of tasks that are assigned to them. I'm going to be including subtasks in this because remember, we're working out of the subtasks. So that's going to be super important there. I'm just grouping this by assignee, and then I have a couple filters in here as well. Looking at the status is not going to be closed there. I also have task types filtered out, record. Again, that's going to be something that could be assigned to like a CRM system, and then task type is non-actionable. That's essentially those parent tasks. There we can filter out, and then I'm looking at due date is overdue, and then also pulling in those assignments there where it is part of our marketing team. So I can pull that. In addition, down here is just kind of a way for me to build another pie chart. So you can use custom fields inside of ClickUp. I have a video on custom fields that'll help you sort of walk through the fields that we would use. I'll put that in the description below. But as you can see here now, if I'm in client services versus maybe I'm in internal marketing team, this would be a little bit different. This custom field could be like work category, where I'm filtering this by maybe website work versus content work versus social work, whatever it may be, I can filter it down that way. But essentially now I'm able to group by that client here. So now I can start to see, if I'm an agency, I can start to see which clients are struggling a little bit because all of our overdue work is the work that we're doing for them. And so I can start to filter that out that way. Again, if you want to create a pie chart where this would be by work category, you could start to see how much work was overdue in terms of our website work versus our SEO work versus our social work versus our ad work, whatever it may be. You can filter that down however you want to. But again, those custom fields have to be built into your tasks. So that's why you'll want to make sure that is all built in there. Again, I have another video on that. I'll put in the description below if you want to go ahead and watch that if you're curious about those custom fields. And then in addition here, this is just kind of my way to see those overdue tasks across the team, see the due dates, those priorities, who it was assigned to. Maybe we need to remap these, assign them to someone else, whatever that may be. I can start to see all that work right here. And as you can see, we have a lot of overdue tasks, which is not a great sign, which probably some issues here, need a little bit better leadership and management overall. And so now as we shift out of those overdue tasks, once we get a lot of these remapped, maybe reassigned and just moved and shifted to the appropriate timeline for when they should actually be completed, now we can actually dive into this week's work. And so now we're looking at this week's priorities. And so this is something that you can look at every single day. Maybe some of this stuff is what you're looking at on a Monday. Now, as we jump into here with this week's priorities, this is what we're looking at every single day during this specific week. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, this is what I could look at every single morning or in the afternoon. Essentially, I can come here. This is a relatively similar widget to what we were looking at earlier, but now we're just looking at it when it's actually for this specific week. So again, another bar chart just planned for this week. I'm looking at sort of the same type of data with the x-axis being my assignee. Now I have y-axis is the time estimate. I could also make this tasks if I wanted to. So you can change that up however you want to. Sometimes it's helpful if you're using time estimates to look at it with time so we can understand sort of how much work is on that person's plate versus just tasks, which doesn't really tell me. I could have a task that takes 4 hours versus 15 minutes. That might not give you as good of data there. So that's why I like to look at it with a time estimate to really understand my team's capacity. But as you can see here, now I'm looking at what hasn't been started as we near Friday afternoon, maybe if we have a bunch of not started work, that's going to be, maybe it's Friday at 12 o'clock and we have 10 hours of not started work. That could be an issue because unless they're going to be working on the weekend or working late into the Friday evening, we might not get all of that done. So maybe we have to shift some things around on a Friday afternoon to make sure we're completing all that work. But as you can see here, this is a great way for me to just see sort of my team, what we've actually planned for them this week and what they've actually completed or closed overall. Then also here, you could just have another pie chart. Again, some of these are optional. Some of these are helpful to have. Some of them are just more sort of high level there, but just looking at sort of the priority there. If you're using that priority flag, I can just create a pie chart to see that information. And then down here, this is also super helpful here and important to note is we have some more calculation widgets. And so within these widgets, this is super important because I have, as you can see, total planned hours here is just 9 hours and 20 minutes. That information is tied to the due dates that are assigned to our team this week, as well as the time estimates on those tasks. And so that only shows 9 hours and 20 minutes, which is like, that's clearly not enough time that's been planned on our team's plate. We have 3 people on our team there. We have way more capacity to take on than just 9 hours and 20 minutes. However, the big thing here to note is we have a lot of overdue tasks. And so this widget is only going to show the work that has a due date of this week with a time estimate on it. But if we have a bunch of overdue tasks, that means essentially that work is following the due date is last week or not this week. And so what that means is that's not going to populate this. And so it does look like 9 hours and 20 minutes, but we also have a lot of overdue tasks. So that means this could actually be probably 120, 130, 140 hours because we have a lot of overdue tasks that's not populating that widget. So we need to figure out how best to remap a lot of these due dates to, again, plan that work in a timely fashion to make sure we're actually closing work when it's due, because due dates matter. That's the biggest habit that your team needs to follow. You need to make sure that they are focused on getting their work done on time. So that's sort of the difference between these two. That's why that looks like 9 hours and 20 minutes, although we might have a ton of work, but because this is not actually pushing into that, because it's overdue work, that is a big issue. So we want to make sure we don't have a bunch of overdue tasks in the system. That's how things start to slip through the cracks. That's how things really just get out of hand and make it impossible to manage your team inside of ClickUp. So those are 2 big things there to note. And then in addition, I can also pull in my workload view across the team to really start to get some more good visuals on that. Again, with a workload view, if a task has a due date in the past or it's overdue, it's not going to show up on the correct date for when that person is actually doing it. So that's going to make your workload view not all that accurate. So if you want this to be accurate, you need to make sure that you have those due dates mattering. You need to make sure you are remapping those due dates and making sure that you're getting better at planning as a team on a weekly or daily basis. We want to get all that work done on time. And so the way that I actually do this is not a traditional card that I'm adding in here. To do that and add your workload view, you would actually go ahead and create a view at the everything level or wherever that may be. And so what I'm able to do is basically embed ClickUp into ClickUp. So I can create a custom embed. Basically, when I create a view, a workload view inside of somewhere else in my ClickUp workspace, I can copy that link just like I would here, basically take that and then go ahead and embed that URL into my dashboard. So basically I'm embedding ClickUp into ClickUp, which makes it easy for me to then create a workload view so that it's directly underneath all of this week's priorities, just like that. So just kind of a hack there for you to use, super helpful for you when you're trying to manage your team's workload there. And so that's really the work that we're doing, the individual tasks that are assigned to them. And now as I go down here, we can also look at all of these specific deliverables and projects as well. So again, as I mentioned earlier, we were looking at sort of those subtasks that the team was working on. If I want to actually look at what the team has assigned to them, I could easily come here to see those individual tasks, what they've worked on, what they haven't completed, and what's actually closed. But now I can drop down to this and create a nice, again, another task list that's going to show me those parent tasks and what is actually assigned to our team, what our team needs to complete maybe this week, or maybe I look at it this in a more of a month basis here. But now I'm looking at sort of what's the due date? Are we ahead of schedule or behind on schedule on these things that we're actually trying to ship as a team? So this is kind of a great way, again, look at those nitty gritty subtasks, what the team's actually looking on, but then collectively as a whole, what are we trying to accomplish? How well are we doing that in terms of how we're pacing towards those deadlines that we've set for our team? So all this is going to work together in terms of getting better at planning, helping you understand sort of how the team is doing, and can we actually ship these things on time? Are these due dates going to be realistic? You need to understand all of that and be able to hold the team accountable. But now transitioning into our last section, which is probably going to be the most important, this is where we're looking at our team's habits. So as you can see here, now I'm looking at sort of how well the team is operating in the system. And so this is where now you're really going to be able to hold the team accountable, because you can, once you create a single source of truth in ClickUp, I can really understand what my team is doing on a daily basis, which is super helpful for you if you're managing your team well. And so now if I come down here, the amazing widget that I love that ClickUp has is the Who's Behind widget. So essentially all I need to do is add a card. If you search for Who's Behind, it's going to show up directly there. As you can see, Who's Behind, just like that, you pull that up. And essentially what that does and what it shows me is it shows me who has a lot of unread notifications and who has a lot of overdue tasks. And so this is super important, because if you want to make sure your team is communicating ClickUp well, which I highly recommend, if we can create sort of a single system where all the communication and all the work is living, that makes it way easier to make sure that no one's sort of missing something, and especially missing some context if you're working with clients or even internally. We want to make sure all of our communication gets into the system. However, as you can imagine, if you have an email inbox and you have 500 unread emails, what are the chances that you're actually going to go through any of those and actually read your email at all? Probably very slim. I know that's the case for me. So what we want to do is make sure the whole team is reading all of their notifications inside of ClickUp and basically getting to inbox 0 every single day, because that's going to tell me, hey, they're communicating well inside of ClickUp. They're taking this seriously, and they're using it as their single source of truth. So again, as you can see here, this probably tells me, hey, I need to flag Gray and say, you need to go clear your notifications. You need to read through those, because there's a chance that we're not getting work done on time because you're missing some communication with your team. So this kind of shows me how well we're working together. So again, this pulls everyone's unread notifications. You need to flag the people that have a bunch. And then in addition, unread notification or the overdue tasks as well. Super important. As you can see, 502 there. It's probably not a good sign there for me. That's a big issue that I need to flag and get in touch with the team. But again, on one unread notification, maybe that's a way to celebrate some success there. And then another big one is an activity view. So an activity view is essentially a way for you to pull any activity you want. There's a lot of different fields that you could pull, whether it's leaving comments, whether it's changing custom fields, whether it's moving tasks, reactions, whatever it may be. But a cool one that I would recommend putting into this dashboard as well is for you to filter this down by those comments. So again, if I come back here, look at my activities, I'm just doing it due dates here. So I'm looking at the due dates for our team and basically which ones have been moved. So what I'm trying to do here is essentially say like, hey, who keeps pushing due dates for their tasks? And so what that means is if they keep pushing them, then those due dates do not matter to them. And so I want to make sure again that we're not just saying, hey, we're going to put a task due date of August 8th. And then if it comes and I don't get time for it, I'm going to push it to the 9th. If it comes, I don't have time for it, I'm going to push it to the 10th. So on and so forth. We don't want that to happen. So we want to make sure we're flagging those issues early on and being more proactive to make sure that the team, again, is knowing that due dates matter for us. So again, we use this activity widget for us to be able to see that information where a bunch of due dates have been pushed across the team. So that's a super helpful one to have as well. And then down here, the last one to celebrate the success of the team is Workspace Points. And so Workspace Points are essentially a way for me to see not the bad that's happening in ClickUp, but being able for me to see the comments that have been added, who's resolved the most comments, who's completed a bunch of tasks, who's worked on a bunch of tasks, and who has the most points based off of all of those different sections there. So this is kind of a way for me to say, hey, you've been doing well inside of ClickUp. You've added a bunch of comments. You've completed a bunch of tasks. You've worked on a bunch of tasks. Here's your total points. I'm going to celebrate the success from my team because, again, we want to hold the team accountable, but also celebrate them when they're doing well because that's going to be a great way for the team just to build momentum and really get a little gamification in here and make the team sort of competitive to say, hey, I want to get the most Workspace points next week. So I'm going to leave a lot of comments. I'm going to complete a lot of my tasks and do a bunch of stuff inside of ClickUp. And so that's how you build a single dashboard to help you manage your team inside of ClickUp. And so if you'd like ClickUp's first ever and highest rated solutions partner to help you build that dashboard and the system that you need to really create this kind of clarity, build that single source of truth, and really help you manage your team's performance and habits across the system, go to ZenPilot.com/call and book a call with one of our experts. We've helped over 3,000 different teams build more productive, more profitable, and healthy teams by streamlining their operations inside of ClickUp, and we'd love to do the same for you. And if you have any questions or comments about this video, go ahead and leave them in the comment section below, and I'll get right back to you. And with that, that's all I have for today. Thank you so much for watching this video. I'll see you again in the next one.